I'll never forget. Like, I'll never forget. Do you know what I mean? Do I forgive him? At the core, I do forgive him, but do I still live with the consequences and the mental illness of what happened? Yeah. And some days it rears its ugly head.
That's Marc Ryan, aka the Beautiful Bogan, and he's not what you might expect from looking at him.
I can't fight, but we can talk about our feelings.
Marc's not your typical stand-up comedian. He blends light-hearted laughs with mental health advocacy, using his gigs as a platform to show people they're not alone in the struggle.
Maybe if I share my experiences, and wrap it up in a bit of humour, I can start making a difference.
In between jokes, Marc shares the story of the abuse he suffered at the hands of a family member as a teenager and speaks openly about the trauma it caused him, damage he still deals with every day.
Uncle that was a bit twisted and sick and used to torture me, like handcuff me to a clothesline and torture me for hours at a time.
Marc is a brave man who's living for his kids and for his mission to let as many people as he can know that no matter how bad it gets, you've got to keep fighting.
But that's what we have to do. We have to keep fighting.
Welcome to Young Blood, an award-winning podcast on a mission to make the mental health of young men a top priority. My name's Callum McPherson, I'm a journalist, and this is our platform to open up and share stories of what we've been through because we're not alone. Let's do it. This episode has been made possible by Kookaburra Homes, the home builder that cares about the community. Kookaburra is big on investing in local projects that better our society and is an awesome supporter of Young Blood's mission to improve the lives of young men and everyone in their lives by opening up these conversations that we need to have. Trigger warning, this episode discusses suicide. If you or someone you know is suicidal, please call Lifeline on 13 14 11 or the suicide prevention hotline in your country. How bogan are you?
Pretty bogan. I like West End. I wear thongs. I live in the northern suburbs. I like wearing singlets. Essentially, a bogan to me is being a soul of the earth, Australian kind of guy, down to earth, helpful. And I think for the most part, they're all right dudes. Some of them, and their values probably need to be checked.
I guess probably not all bogans are created equal as well.
That's exactly right.
Do you think, are bogans born or made?
Oh, they're definitely created. They're born and then their parents have I've got kids that wouldn't necessarily, I've got 3 kids, 3 boys.
Junior bogans?
One of them is, and the others will have no part of it.
So there's a choice then?
It's a choice.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I've got my youngest who's flat out, but he's just an idiot anyway. But he's my favourite.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Do you make that known?
Yeah. Hey, look, you got to let the other kids know how to be better.
Is that because he's the only one who followed in his dad's footsteps?
Nah, because he's just better at stuff.
Right.
Yeah, he's just a funny kid. He's 11. And he's just wild. He's just got a wild imagination. He tells me lies, which are funny lies. And they make me look like an idiot, but I appreciate them because I'm a stand-up. So,
yeah.
For instance, this whole car park they're renovating at his school. I said, hey, mate, what are they doing there? He goes, they're building chicken coops and a farm thing. And I'm like, that's really cool. He goes, yeah, they've got a community garden. And I was like, really? That's cool. For a school in the northern suburbs, I was like, oh, man. And then I ran into this assistant principal at basketball. And I'm like, hey,
and you're like, how's the chicken coop?
I'm like, man, that's really cool, the little farm you're building. He goes, what farm? I'm like, farm? Oh, no, it's just a new set of office blocks. I was like...
And what was your childhood like growing up?
It had its rough patches. You know what I mean? My parents did the best job they could do. I guess the reason I'm in the hole I am at the moment with mental health and different stuff is that I had an uncle that was a bit twisted and sick and used to torture me, handcuff me to a clothesline and torture me for hours at a time. And
when you say torture, how so?
He'd put pegs, clothes pegs all over my face and set German Shepherds onto me, just to bark right near me and squirt me with water and just do sadistic stuff like that. And
how did that start?
You know what? I can't even remember.
Well, how young were you?
Oh, I was 13. So it happened for probably about a whole summer. My parents would drop me at his house because I had a sick brother, and they'd drop me at his house for him to look after me for the weekend. And so then he'd be like, oh, let's come out the back. And then you just like, and then, you know, because I'm in therapy now because of all that kind of stuff. And so like you just kind of, I guess you trusted him and you didn't know any different. You're like, oh, okay, it's just a game. But the moment, I remember one moment where he would bring this dead frog out and tease me with a dead frog right in front of my face and just like, oh, look, it's, you know, and his wife was in it and just like, and it, you know, it never really hit home until I was working at Coles. And one day some dude come and put a clothes peg on my ear. Man, the anxiety attack I had, like I burst into tears. My heart rate went through the roof.
Shit.
And then all these memories come flooding back and I'm like, oh, man.
Because you'd repressed it all and gone into denial.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, and that's what I call sort of day zero. That's when like everything really hit the fan. And I was like, man, like I don't know if I want to be here anymore. I don't know. Because I've always had really so low self-esteem because of tracing back, you know, because before 13, I was all right.
Yeah.
And then after that, I've always had this, I guess, tendency to think about taking my life, and I've always had the, you know, that kind of thing going on. So yeah.
Just like that experience sort of broke part of you.
Oh, 100%. Like it just, yeah, 100% it did.
So he used to lure you out there and sort of act like it was a game initially. To the point where you were handcuffed to the clothesline and then would just do whatever to you.
Do whatever.
Hours.
Yeah. I remember his record was putting 52 pegs all over my face, like just like everywhere. And they would sting for ages. And you just leave them there. And, you know, it's hard to prove because like I remember him taking photos and then he showed my mum one day. My mum was like, what are you doing? Like, if his dad finds this out, he's going to kill you. And so they kept it all because she didn't want her brother to get hurt. Do you know what I mean? And, yeah.
So you didn't tell your dad about it?
I only started telling him. So I guess where this ties into my day job with stand-up is I wanted to get to the core of why do I feel the way I feel? Like, why do I hate myself so much? Why can't I do Father's Day? Why is Father's Day like I lay in bed all day wanting to cry because I don't feel like a good dad? Like, why is my self-worth, like why can't I celebrate birthdays? Essentially, why do I want to take myself from this earth? A lot of the time that's the thought process I have. And then doing stand-up and, you know, being one guy on stage, do you know what I mean? Trying to be funny and doing that, and I'm good at it. So I had to explore what that was. And then when I got to the bottom of that, I was like, well, maybe if I share my experiences, you know, and wrap it up in a bit of humour, I can start making a difference.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I did 30 gigs in 30 days, and it was a self-produced tour, which essentially we just had fringe. So it's not a real big deal. A lot of dudes did 50, 60, 100 gigs over the span of the fringe, which is, 30 days.
Yeah.
I guess the difference with what I did was...
But you're travelling around?
I travelled everywhere.
Yeah.
So I did 4 shows in Roxby in 24 hours. I did shows in a skate bowl, in a boxing gym. Like, wherever would have me, I'd do a show. And then I'd start off by telling about my family and making jokes about my youngest son. And then I'd say, but this is what happened to me. And the whole purpose of it was if there was anyone in the crowd to let them know, like, you're not alone.
Yeah.
Like,
but also making that funny.
Yeah.
That's because fuck, it's not funny.
It's not funny at all. And I guess you're kind of luring people in a little bit with the laughter at the start, right? And then saying, well, this happened to me, because there's probably 5 to 7 minutes of the show that isn't funny. Right, because you're talking about this stuff and people, you can hear the air suck out of the room and people go, oh,
yeah,
oh, and you're like, yeah, but, yeah, and I guess the core of it was what really changed my stand-up career was, because stand-up's narcissistic by nature. There's one person on stage trying to get all the laughs for them, for their self-esteem.
Yeah, and that your self-esteem totally relies on whether people laugh or they don't. Yeah, as a stand-up comedian, you're already really putting yourself out there. Let alone then talking about your PTSD, like.
Yeah. and suicidal ideation. Like,
But how have you found that people do respond to it though overall?
man, do you know how many times after a show, dudes will come up and go, "Hey, can I talk to you?" "Yeah, man." "Oh, I think I need a hug." Yeah,
Really?
bring it in, brother. Like, I'm not scared to hug people. Like,
Yeah.
I can't fix anything. I can't fix myself, right? I'm still on this journey trying to work shit out daily for myself. Do you know what I mean? So I say to people, I can't fix anything. But if you want to talk afterwards, if you want to hug, if you want to have a beer, just have a yarn. You know what I mean? Like, I can just only share my experience. Like, I can encourage you to go get a mental health plan, to go see someone. Like, that's the bulk of all I can do.
Yeah.
Right? But I think they're saying in sharing a lived experience that people sit back and go, "Oh, all right." You know, maybe it takes the edge off of it, not knowing someone's been through it.
Well,
I don't know.
absolutely. And that's the whole reason that we do this show, is to give people examples of others who've been through something similar or who are brave enough to step up and say, yeah, this happened to me and I accept that and this is what it was like.
Yeah.
And that there's no shame in living through life and facing things that can be terrible and hard to deal with, and we need to do it together.
Yeah, 100%. And so I guess, like, I did a show once in a backyard, which isn't uncommon. Like, anyone can ring me, "Oh, do you want to come do a show?" Yeah, I'm up for anything.
You'll do
right?
it anywhere.
Because I know if I want to get good, I need a hustle.
Yeah.
Right? And every time you're on stage, that's 10 minutes better than you were before.
Yeah.
Right? And that's... So I'll do gigs anyway. So this guy's rang me one day and said, "Oh, can you do a show in our backyard?" I said, "Yeah, of course." He goes, "But there's a catch." I said, "What's the catch?" He said, "Oh, they've just stopped my friend's cancer treatment. He's got 2.5 weeks to live." And I was like... And he goes, he wants one last stand-up show before he dies. I was like,
Jeez.
oh.
And they've chosen you.
And this dude's like, "I think you're one of the only dudes that can do it." And I was like, all right.
You're like, is that a compliment?
And he's like, "How much do you want for it?" I'm like, "Fuck off." And part of me was like, how do you do this? How does this work out? You know, like, you've got a family that's heartbroken, like their dad, their partner, their uncle is, you know. And so I kind of went in there, I was like, and I looked around, and the moment I walked in, people started crying, and I was like, oh man.
You're used to that.
Yeah. I was like, oh, what do I do? And it dawned on me right there. I was like, I can't change this. And so I pointed out, I said, "Ange, I can't change this. I can't fix this. But you know what? We can laugh about life for half an hour. Let's just forget everything. Let's just forget it all. Like, can't hurt us now. Let's have a beer and just forget everything." And that's kind of the message in my show, is I can't fix now what my uncle did to me, right? I can't fix the bullying at school. I can't fix all the stuff that happened to me around that age. I can't fix it now. But we can laugh about it a little bit, and we can laugh about life, because life is actually, when we peel back the layers, it's funny.
Yeah.
Like, it is.
Well, and if you don't laugh, you cry. And
If you don't laugh, you cry. And I do a lot of crying.
we do both.
Yeah, I do a lot of crying. Like,
Yeah.
and that's all right. If we just work together and talk and communicate, that can help. You know, so that's kind of the...
Well, laughter is such a great tool for disarming people and making us feel more comfortable, so that we're, you know, a lot more open to just being honest. And then you can sort of, once you've chipped away at that, you can create a more sort of authentic dialogue among people, or people feel like, you know, they don't have to bullshit each other in those moments.
Yeah, and it's a bit safer, I think, maybe. You know, people just kind of... And when you're vulnerable, like I'm very vulnerable on stage. Like, yeah, this is what happened. And, you know, when I was halfway through that tour in Streaky Bay, like, I was doing that show, and I talked about, you know, I said, you know, the mind... I was talking about the repressed memories and how the mind hides a lot of stuff that it doesn't want us to feel or to remember. But, you know, that day happened at work, and then this happened, and then all these memories come back about my uncle's house, and no word of a lie, my face started to hurt where the pegs used to be. Yeah, I was standing on stage going, holy shit. I had a moment where I'm like, I was just vulnerable and said, look, just give me a sec. Because I remembered I was in the trance where I was just like, fuck, I can feel stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm not surprised. I mean,
Yeah.
we've had people on this show, like a guy recently got his leg taken by a shark, and he still feels the pain in the leg It's not there sometimes.
Yeah, wow.
Because it's amazing what the brain does and where it goes back to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was kind of at that point. And yeah, I just, like I said, the vulnerability just opens people up, because people just go, well, if he's going to be vulnerable, yeah, and no one makes jokes about it because why would you? Like,
except you. But people are still receptive to it, which is showing that it's possible. And I think there's even more power in a bogan like you coming forward and doing that too, because not only are we not comfortable being vulnerable or talking about that stuff, putting those messages out there, but certainly, generally people look like tough blokes like you.
Yeah.
Definitely not.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing, because I say to people, like, I can't fight.
Yeah.
Like
you're not tough. You're a teddy bear.
I'm a big teddy. Like, I can't fight. Like,
that's why you have to be funny.
Yeah, and I like running. Yeah. So I'm not a good runner, but I like running. Like,
it's hard in thongs.
It's hard. So the only time I don't wear thongs is when I got my trail shoes on, because I like trail running. I don't even know. I'm not good at anything apart from talking.
Yeah, well,
that's right.
Seems to serve you all right. Yeah. So just back to like the first time that happened with your uncle.
Yeah.
So what, you just went home after that? Because obviously you kept going back to your uncle's. And you knew what was going to happen after a while.
Well, I think,
like, how sort of regular was that?
It was.
Was it always the same thing?
Yeah, it was always like, it was probably over summer holidays, right? Like, and because so I had a sick brother who was in hospital a lot. So my mum and dad, and like I said, they did the best job they could. They didn't know, right, until later on. Like, it was a whole kind of summer that it kind of happened, and it's that kind of thing where people are laughing, and so you're like, oh, it's kind of funny. It's kind of fun. But I remember the day that I realised that this isn't funny anymore is when he'd bought some new handcuffs, right? And they were cop ones, so every time you moved, they tightened even more. And I remember my wrists getting cut from these. And I was like, this isn't fun anyway. Like, it was never fun, but now this is just taking a serious.
They initially tried to sort of sell it to you as being fun.
Yeah, let's do this. This is good fun. Like, they're abusers.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, they're flat out abusers.
Him and his partner as well.
Yeah, him and his partner, and it was like, okay, because I was 13. I trusted. I didn't have many friends growing. I didn't have many friends growing up. I went to a private school, and my mum and dad, for the most part, were reasonably poor.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But they believed in education, which is disappointing for them now. They're like, this dickhead just talks on stage. But they sacrificed a lot for us to go to private schools. But I never fit in because I just didn't have the Nikes. I didn't have any of the shoes, didn't have any of the clothes. And so my uncle was kind of my best friend for the most part, and he knew that.
So he manipulated that.
And and there was a heap of other stuff that would happen. Like, I remember, he got me drunk one. Oh, drink this, drink that, like all like shots. And I guess the clothesline stuff was the peak of it. Do you know what I mean? It was all. I mean, knowing what I know now, I guess it's all grooming and
yep.
And nothing. It was nothing ever sexual. Do you know what I mean? Which I'm lucky. I guess I'm lucky for.
Yeah.
But he'd set you up with pornography. And this is your bedroom over here. Don't worry about those magazines. Don't worry about them. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
And you're like 12 or 13, and you're like, don't. And he knew. Now you look back, you knew what you were doing. Do you know what I mean? Like, he knew what the game was.
But I didn't go to actually abusing you. But
no.
That seems like a sort of a pre-step towards.
Yeah. But he never touched me or did anything like that.
Well, except for handcuffing too.
Apart from handcuffing and I remember one day he said, "Oh, let's play a game." I was like, "All right, cool." Like, you're 13. Like, he goes, "The game is you have to slap me, and then I have to slap you back. But I'll do it. It's a game like who can slap harder." And I was like,
"Yeah."
And I was going like, I'll just slap you a little bit. You know what I mean? Because I don't want to get hit. I remember, man, he come back, whack, slap. I was like, fuck. Oh, was that funny? I was like, what the fuck? No.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, you're just like,
It's just so confusing as well.
it's because I said,
And
like,
you thought this guy was your friend.
you think he's your friend,
Yeah.
like, which is what most abusers do, right? They groom into like, oh, we're mates. This is just fun. This is just until, like I said, your repressed memories come back and you go, and the anxiety comes back and the feeling worthless, like the pure, like, some people just don't get the feeling of absolute feeling worthless. Like, you just don't feel like anything. People are like, oh, you should celebrate your birthday. I don't. Like, I don't want to be made, which is also a weird thing because I'm a stand-up comedian. So
You don't want to be in the spotlight.
I want to be in the spotlight when I'm on stage, but off stage,
So that's just one of those results of that abuse has just made you feel like that around those kinds of days. And
yeah, I just, like, every day, like, my biggest mental illness, I guess, I deal with is suicide ideation. So there's not a day that goes by that I don't think or plan or imagine taking my own life. Do you know what I mean? Not a day. And some people go, just don't. Oh, I wish I could. Do you know what I mean? I really wish there was a day that I didn't imagine that. But I've got things in place now to remind myself, oi, take a deep breath. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've got a tattoo with the Grim Reaper crossed out to remind myself that, like, it's a silly thing, like Amity Affliction are a band, and they've got that Youngbloods, actually, the song. I think they say, have you ever felt the breath of the Midnight Reaper? You know what I mean? I was like, I can't get the lyrics tattooed on my arm, but maybe if I get the Grim Reaper crossed out, that's what it means to me.
Yeah, it's a good take on it.
Yeah, so, and then talking to my therapist, that's all symptoms of PTSD and trauma where you're made to feel less than a human.
Yeah, at that time of development.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And so how did that stop with your uncle?
I just, I think he just had a massive fight with my mum. Like, not over that. It was just like family feud, and then they just went, you can't stay at uncle's house anymore. And so part of me was like,
good,
but then upset because he was my only friend. Do you know what I mean?
And that's that confusing nature of those abusive relationships when they've made you feel like you are their friend and then manipulate you and take advantage of you, and the victim becomes, confused about where they stand.
And the fear of missing out. Oh, because he had a lot of money. As in, they didn't have a lot of money, but they had more money than my mum and dad, and they didn't have any kids. So we'd get takeout all the time, which when you're 13 and coming from a family that doesn't have a lot of money is a massive... I remember KFC was a big deal back in the day. Well, it was called Kentucky Fried Chicken back then, which have changed anyway. But that was a massive deal. Like, or getting treats was a massive thing. Or he'd always have the newest console because he had money to pay for stuff.
Yeah.
Right? And so when that relationship broke, you were kind of like, oh. But part of you is also like, oh, thank God. Like, that got taken out of my hands.
Do you remember it really affecting you at the time, like after you'd go home or go to school or whatever, or did you repress it so much that you sort of didn't think about it until later?
I think it was really repressed. I think it was really repressed because I tried not to think about it, but also on the other hand, ever since then I've had these thoughts every day. Do you know what I mean? And I've always been... always had suicidal tendencies, always had those thoughts, or I've always had that depression and anxiety. I've never known what it was. You know what I mean? And I've always been an overthinker, and I've always, like, if someone did say hello to me or whatever, I'd be like, oh, what have I done? What have I done? Like, I've always got self-esteem issues since then.
Yeah.
Even to a point, like, I remember I ran a show called Mosh Against Suicide back in the day when I was in 99. We put on this punk rock show. I was only 19, and we had, like, bands like Embodiment and Seraph Cole and all these Adelaide bands play shows for this Mosh Against Suicide thing, because that was my way of, I think, deflecting my own pain.
Right.
So
when did you start seeking help for it, or when did you realise that it was real?
You know what? After I did that series of shows, I was actually I've got a foster son, and I was taking him to therapy, And I remember one day I just broke in his therapy. Like I was like, the therapist was talking, and I've just lost my shit. And I'd seen a therapist a few times before that with a mental I but nothing really come of it. Like it was like, what's going on? Oh, I feel like shit. I feel like killing myself. I feel like this. But why? But it was I think it was so repressed that it wasn't even a thing. And then after I did those shows, like, it was a series of events that happened that I was talking to someone. I said, oh yeah, my uncle used to do this to me. And this dude looked at me and went, like, looked me in the eyes and went, that's not right. And I was like, huh? He goes, that wasn't right. That's not good. And that made me go, so that didn't happen to everybody else. Yeah. Like in my brain, I'm like, that wasn't a normal, like other people didn't have, like other people have, but not everyone had an uncle.
It wasn't good.
And I was like,
So that was the first time that that brought that up and you actually thought about it differently.
Yeah. And I was like, man, God. And I remember walking out of the cafe just going, and because I was doing this show.
So when was this?
This was probably about 2 months before I started the Black Dog. So my tour that I did, the 30-day tour, was called the Beautiful Bogan versus the Black Dog.
Yeah.
And at the point, it was just talking about depression and the way I felt. But that was a moment in time that actually stopped and went, maybe that's why I feel the way I do.
And what year was that?
3 years ago.
Right.
Now.
Yeah. So it's still pretty recent that you realised that was where it all sort of stems from.
Oh yeah, so I guess the incident back at Coles was the start of like my real, like really being sick, as in, or unwell in my own mind. Like I remember, really being down and really like, just really not well. Do you know what I mean? But to try and explain that to family members and a wife, and when you've got kids, and it was way hard. Like it was so difficult to be able to go, I'm not well. And so I would just go, I'm going to see a doctor, I'm going to see a therapist or whatever. And back then I used to be 150 kilos. So my weight as well was a big thing. Do you know what I mean? And I just ate my feelings. This was at Coles. This was years and years ago. Late 20s. Yeah, late 20s.
Yeah.
And then, so that incident happened at Coles, which brought everything up. I didn't know how to deal with it. Fast forward a little bit of just struggling, like just really struggling. I found stand-up, which kind of took the pain away for a little bit, because all of a sudden I was getting attention just for being funny.
Yeah.
And,
how did that start?
Well, in a counsellor's office, where he was like, oh, when was the last time you felt good about life? I said, I made people laugh at a best man speech. And he was like, you want to be a comedian? I was like,
yep.
I'd never thought, hey, like, do I? It's better than picking boxes. But, and then he was like, don't. I'm like, what do you mean?
Thanks.
Because that's the most vulnerable art form that there is. But it's risk-taking, right? And, like, I've got, I'll take risks. And I did. And so I got up on stage and I felt good and I think stand-up put it back in its place again, like repressed it a little bit more again, because it was starting to take over my thoughts. And then when stand-up didn't get enough, or when it got brought up again and someone was like, this happened. When that guy in the cafe was like, that's not good. And it brings it all back again and you're like, no, it's not. It's not good. And so then I was halfway through writing that show. So back in, 3 years ago now, I was back writing that show, The Beautiful Bogan versus the Black Dog. I was like, I have to put this in the show. Yeah. I have to. So that's the first time I publicly talked about it. And I remember a dude going, are you going to punch a shit out of him? And I'm like, and that whole 30 days was such a journey, because every night I'm talking about this trauma and I'm bringing it back up every single night. And then I think at the end of that, I was broken again. And it wasn't long after that I took my son to therapy, and then I broke in his therapy session.
But you did that whole tour before you were properly seeing someone to help you.
Yeah.
So you just thought, I've got to talk about this. I'm going to do it with no safety net or anything. I'm just going to, and I'm going to do it every day. God, that's pretty brave.
Oh, it's just, I'm so passionate about trying to get in front of this curve, which is, men or women as well taking their life. And now I can put words to it. Back then I didn't know what it was. I was just passionate about trying to let people know that you don't have to. You're needed. And the weirdest thing happened. So halfway through that show, halfway through that tour, I was in Roxby. Tickets weren't selling the way that I wanted to, but at that point, I just went, do you know what? One soul. If it reaches one person, that's enough. If this whole tour saves one family from one man taking their life or one woman taking their life, then that's worth it. Because the pain of families being left behind is incredible. And I remember being up in Roxby, and there were four Maori brothers up there, right? And they were miners, and they were big dudes, and they kind of scared me a little bit. And they saw my show, and then I think it was Heath come up to me after the show and said, "Hey, bro, can we talk to you at the back of the room?" And I was like, "Oh man, I can't fight." And I haven't told him this, but I really was like, "Oh man, I hope I haven't upset these dudes." And they were like, "Hey, look, you don't know what you did tonight." And I was like,
it's not a good start.
I was like, please just get it over and done with. Oh man, what did I do? And they said, our brother took his own life 4 years ago or 3. I can't remember exactly what it was. And they said, I was like, oh man, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. And they said, no, but today was his 40th birthday. Would have been his 40th. And I was like, oh man. And they're like, but you know the weirdest thing? I went, what? And they said, you're wearing a Raiders shirt. All he ever did was wear Raiders gear. And I was like, oh man. And that was an ad hoc gig. That gig was because I was in Roxby at the time, and someone said, do you want to put on a show here? Why not? It was at the last minute. Wasn't even meant to be. And I was like, man, the universe works shit out. Do you know what I mean? And then the dude's like, can I have a hug?
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, man, bring it in, brother. And now I'm still good friends with them guys.
Wow, amazing.
So there's stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like I said before, when you're vulnerable and you open yourself up to the universe to be able to just let people,
And it's more than just making people laugh. It's more than just comedy for you. It's amazing that you can do both. But a lot of comedy gigs, people go, the person's funny or they're not, and people will talk about the shit they said that was funny. There's not a lot of comedians out there where they would afterwards they'd talk about it was funny, and fuck, that story you told, and oh yeah, and then get people talking about mental health. That's very unique.
Well, it's just got it comes back to that gig in the garden in that backyard where it just can't just be about me anymore. Do you know what I mean? I've had an experience. It sucked. I live with the consequences of that experience now. But now I've got a voice. Do you know what I mean? Now I've got a voice, and I want to use it, and I want to try and get in front of this. I want to get in front of this curve, and try and I was in Port Lincoln. When was it? Late last year, right? I'm in the Port Lincoln hotel having a beer. These dudes walk in. The dude comes up to me and he's like, "What the fuck are you doing here?" And I was like, and it was 12:30 at night.
You're like, man, I got to learn to fight.
This dude was a stacked man, and it's him and his brother. What the fuck are you doing here? And he was like, real. I was like, and I seen them drinking espresso martinis because obviously they'd run out of cocaine. Do you know what I mean? So they had 3 by the time he come over to me, and I was like, oh man. And I'm like, I'm a stand-up comedian. I'm about to go on a 7-day tour of Eyre Peninsula. Just talk about my own experiences.
I said we didn't ask for your life story, man.
Just talk about mental health. I pretty much had the conversation I had with you about my life and why I am the way I am. And at a bar at 12:30 at night in Port Lincoln, and at the end of it all, this dude looks at me and just goes, "Are you a counsellor?" I said, "Nah, man. I fucking don't have my shit together." I said, and that's where the whole thing comes in. He goes, "So what do you do after the show if someone's upset?" And you were saying before, this Port Lincoln, And I'm in the front bar with these hardened dudes. And I give him a hug. And this dude just looked at me like, I just punched him in the face. Like, what? You give other men a hug? I'm like, oh, shit. And I've just gone, because I'm not good in tense situations, I just went,
Do you want a hug?
Do you want a hug? And he goes, oh, I think I do.
Wow.
And so I gave him this massive hug. And then he's like, oh, man, hey, brother, come over and give this guy a hug. So I gave this dude a hug. And I was like, it's going to be all right. It's going to be. And so we talked a little bit longer. And then I went back to my Airbnb or whatever. And I found out later on that really broke something in them, right? Because it's our peninsula. I told someone else the story and they're like, oh, you didn't hug them dudes. I went, yes.
You'll hug anyone.
I'll hug anyone, right? And he was like, oh. And then he messaged him and goes, oh, do you know this guy? And he goes, yeah, man, he was cool. I was like, cool, because I'm going back there. But it broke, and there's been pivotal points like that have reminded me that, yeah, it's all right. Like, you're doing the right thing. You know what I mean? I wish we could save everyone. Unfortunately, we can't. Do you know what I mean? But it's my way of trying to get in front of the curve and just trying to...
But we can save some people.
We can save...
And you don't know who you're saving or who you're helping.
Yeah, 100%. And that's why any chance I can get to talk about it and just open up about it. And, everything has a cost. Do you know what I mean? Like, even talking about this, it has a cost. You know what I mean? I'm going to have to go for a run afterwards. I have to work through my feelings. So I've got my safeguards and my safety nets in place now that I'll work through. And that's all part of it. Because if it helps one person, you know what I mean? Because I'm not a good fighter, but I'm brave. You know what I mean? And that's what I say to my kids. I said, I can't fight, but we can talk about our feelings.
Yeah. And that's so much more powerful.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. No, you are extremely brave. So, is your uncle still alive?
Yeah, he lives in. As last time I heard, he changed his name. He lives in Townsville, but again, like someone said to me one day, "Oh, are you going to bash him?" Nah. What does that do? Like what? I won't stop.
So, do you forgive him? Can you ever?
I think I forgive him. I have to forgive him for my own, because I think forgiveness.
It's for you, not them.
It's for, yeah. And I'll never forget. Like, I'll never forget. Do you know what I mean? Do I forgive him? At the core, I do forgive him. But do I still live with the consequences and the mental illness of what happened? Yeah. And some days it rears its ugly head. Do you know what I mean? And you remember stuff and you're like, oh, fuck. But at the core, I forgive him. Do you know what I mean? Because otherwise I can't move on. And this is part of the healing process, is talking about it.
Yeah. And what has talking about it done for you, not for others?
I think it takes the edge off of it. I think going through PTSD therapy, right? It taught me, the more you relive the situations, as hard as they are, like every time you talk about it, it just takes a little bit more of the edge off. Do you know what I mean? And the more it just becomes familiar. And it becomes a story instead of, that's what, I guess that's what the therapists were trying to teach me about it. Yeah.
And how do you feel about having other people know about it or know you for that?
As long as if it saves one life, and that is what it is.
What power have you found in comedy?
Again, there's a whole thing in comedy, time versus tragedy equals funny. I haven't written many jokes about the actual incident. Like, I joke with my wife a lot about, she's like, oh, can you put the washing out? I'm like, really? We've got like 5 dryers at my house. Nah, we don't really. But we joke about that kind of stuff. Like at home, I haven't really, because I think it's on stage, it's still pretty raw to make jokes about, because if people have got the same experience, or not the exact same experience, but the same trauma or the same kind of abuse, like making joke out of the abuse itself.
So that part of the show, when you're speaking about that's not actually funny?
That's not particularly funny. It's more of a grounding moment where you're just relating to people and going, because some people don't know, for years I didn't know why I felt the way I felt.
Yeah.
I didn't. And you're just trying to lay a foundation of humour at the start and say, listen, this is what it is. This is why I have these thoughts. This is why I get anxious sometimes. This is why I'm a mess.
So you bring them in with the humour, and then you give them that message, and then go back to the jokes afterwards.
Then we go back to just laughing about life.
What keeps you alive?
My kids, and my, I've said this to my wife. I love my wife very much. You know what I mean? But my boys are my everything. Do you know what I mean? Like they're solely the reason why I'm still here today, right? And that's it. Like and the fear of, because I like to think I like to put other people first, right? And I always have. Man, my biggest thing is how heartbroken my kids would be if I went through with one of my plans one day and they were left at school until whoever knows when, and that breaks me to think. So that keeps me alive. I even keep my son's pen license. I found his pen license in his school stuff one day, and I keep that in my wallet to remind me, don't. You know what I mean? Like, it's there all the time. That if things get sketchy, don't. Look what you've got to live for. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
You've got a lot of beauty in your life.
Yeah. And again, they're teenage boys. They're frustrating. But at the end of the day, they're my everything. Do you know what I mean? And yeah, so that's, and now, with the message that I've got, I figure, well, fuck, I have to stay around. You know, like, that's what we have to do. We have to keep fighting. Like, I'll fight every day, and I try and run as much as I can, because I've learned through therapy again to match big feelings with big exercise, and then it kind of, so I like trail running. So the other day I went for a run and did 6Ks through Anstey's Hill. Come home, still didn't feel right. I was like, oh, this is going to hurt. So I went for another 7Ks, and then I felt all right after that. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's just, yeah.
There's coping mechanisms.
There's coping mechanisms.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Well, you are the beautiful Bogan, man. You know?
And, thanks.
For a rough exterior, you've obviously got a heart of gold, and I'm really glad that you are still here and that you're taking it upon yourself to go out there and put that message out and doing it at a grassroots level and go from place to place and present and say, look, this thing happened to me. It was really messed up. I can't change that, but I can talk about it, and so can you. And that's all we can ever do. And the impact that you'd be having by sharing that in our state, and then just also people knowing about it all over the place, would be huge. And you'll never know fully. But it's amazing that you've had all those examples of people actually coming up to you and saying, like, hey, you don't know how far that goes, but it definitely goes a long way.
Yeah, well, thanks, man. I really appreciate that.
If you're a fan of the work we're doing or have a suggestion for the show, please rate us on Apple Podcasts and leave a comment. You can follow Youngblood Men's Health Matters on Facebook, Instagram and YouTube, and visit our website youngbloodmedia.com.au to stay up to date. And most importantly, if this conversation resonated with you, share it with someone you love and start a conversation of your own. A huge thank you to our local business supporters who've joined our mission to change the lives of young men for the better and help make this possible. We're all in it together. This is Youngblood. Thanks for being part of the mission. Catch you next time.